Let's begin. Dean Patton stood at his kitchen counter at 6 in the morning, making breakfast for his son while the rest of the house slept. The routine had become sacred to him, these quiet moments before the chaos of the day, just him and 6-year-old Miles, talking about dinosaurs or space or whatever captured the boy's imagination that particular morning. Miles wasn't an easy child. Dean knew that. The teachers had made it abundantly clear at every parent-teacher conference. Too energetic, they said. Can't sit still. Disrupts the class. Dean had lost count of how many times his wife Violet had come home with pamphlets about ADHD medication, her mother Iris whispering in her ear about getting him under control. But Dean saw something else when he looked at his son. He saw curiosity, creativity, a mind that moved faster than his little body could keep up with. Miles didn't need to be sedated. He needed to be understood. Dean had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until he aged out at 18. He put himself through community college working construction jobs, eventually becoming a civil engineer. He'd built a good life through sheer force of will, and he'd be damned if he'd let anyone make his son feel like he was broken. He'd met Violet at a charity gala 5 years ago. She'd seemed different than warmer, more independent. But after Miles was born, something shifted. Her mother Iris had always been overbearing, but it got worse. Every decision about Miles's upbringing became a battlefield, with Iris whispering poison in Violet's ear. "Daddy?" Miles appeared in the doorway, his dark hair sticking up in every direction, clutching his stuffed triceratops. "Hey, buddy." "Scrambled or fried?" "Scrambled. With cheese." Miles climbed onto his chair, swinging his legs. "Is Grandma Iris coming for Thanksgiving?" Dean's jaw tightened. "Yeah, she is. I don't like her," Miles said quietly. "She looks at me like I'm bad." Dean knelt down to his son's eye level. "You're not bad, Miles. You're perfect exactly as you are. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." The boy nodded, but Dean could see the doubt in his eyes. 6 years old, and already the world was trying to convince him he was too much. Violet came downstairs an hour later, already on her phone. She barely glanced at Miles before pouring herself coffee. "Mom called," she said. "She wants to know if we're doing turkey or ham." "It's Thanksgiving." "Turkey," Dean replied, keeping his voice even. "She thinks ham might be easier on Miles. You know how he gets overwhelmed by big meals." "Miles is fine with turkey. He's 6, not an invalid." Violet's lips pressed into a thin line, the same expression her mother wore when challenged. "You always have to be difficult about this. She's just trying to help." Dean bit back his response. They'd had this fight 100 times. Iris had been just trying to help when she suggested boarding school for Miles. Just trying to help when she called him hyperactive and disruptive in front of the whole family last Christmas. Just trying to help when she'd implied Dean's foster care background meant he didn't understand proper child rearing. "I'm going to the office for a few hours," Dean said. "Miles, want to come with me?" The boy's face lit up. He loved visiting Dean's work, looking at blueprints and models of buildings. "It's Saturday, Dean. He should be home. He wants to come. Don't you, buddy?" Miles nodded enthusiastically. Violet sighed. "Fine, but he needs to be back by 3. Mom's coming over to discuss Thanksgiving plans." Of course, she was. Dean's office was in a converted warehouse in the historic district. His small firm specialized in adaptive reuse, taking old buildings and giving them new life. It was work he found deeply satisfying, proving that things didn't need to be torn down and replaced, just reimagined. His partner, Jorge Carroll, was already there, hunched over a set of plans for a former textile mill they were converting into loft apartments. "Patton. And the little man." Jorge grinned at Miles. "Come look at this, kid. We're putting a slide from the 2nd floor to the 1st. Miles rushed over, and Dean felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. This was his real family, the people who saw Miles for who he was and loved him for it. "Thanksgiving at the in-laws?" Jorge asked quietly while Miles examined the model. "They're coming to us this year." Jorge winced. "Sorry, man. That woman's got ice water in her veins." Dean had met Jorge in college, one of the few people who'd known him before Violet, before the Pittmans entered his life with their old money and older judgments. Jorge had been at the wedding, had watched the slow change in Violet over the years. "She's been pushing the medication thing again," Dean said. "For a 6-year-old? That's insane. Tell Violet that." Every time I push back, I'm being difficult or not thinking of what's best for Miles. Jorge shook his head. You know I'm here if you need anything, right? You and Miles always have a place to crash. Dean appreciated the offer, even if he hoped he'd never need to take it. He'd fought too hard for this life to let it fall apart. They returned home at 2:30 to find Iris Pittman's Mercedes already parked in the driveway. Dean's stomach sank. Iris was in the living room with Violet, both of them looking up when Dean and Miles entered. Iris's face was perfectly composed, elegant silver hair, expensive clothes, a smile that never reached her eyes. Dean, she said coolly, taking Miles on one of your little adventures again? Just showing him some projects. Miles, go wash up for snack. The boys scurried away, and Dean noticed how quickly he moved like he was escaping. We need to discuss Thanksgiving, Iris said, not bothering with pleasantries. I think it would be best if Miles ate separately this year. In the kitchen, perhaps. He disrupted dinner so badly last year. He knocked over a glass. He was 5. He was out of control, Iris said sharply. And you refused to do anything about it. Violet and I have been researching options. He's not going on medication. Dr. Hammond has agreed to write a prescription. She's very well regarded. I don't care if she's the Surgeon General. Miles doesn't need medication. He needs people to stop treating him like he's defective. Iris's expression hardened. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Violet. He won't listen to reason. Violet looked between them, conflict clear on her face. There was a time when she would have stood up to her mother, would have defended their son. But that time felt like ancient history now. Maybe we should at least consider it, Violet said softly. Just to try. No. Dean's voice was firm. This conversation is over. He left the room before he said something he'd regret. Heading upstairs to check on Miles. He found the boy in his room, building an elaborate structure out of blocks. You okay, buddy? Miles nodded, not looking up. I heard Grandma. She thinks I'm bad. Dean sat down on the floor next to him. You're not bad. You're extraordinary. And I will never, ever let anyone convince you otherwise. Miles finally looked at him, and Dean saw tears in his eyes. Promise? I promise. The next 2 weeks passed in cold tension. Violet barely spoke to Dean except to coordinate logistics for Thanksgiving. Iris called daily, always when Dean was at work. Her influence seeping deeper into his marriage like rot in a foundation. Dean threw himself into work and time with Miles. They went to the science museum, the park, anywhere that let the boy just be himself. In those moments, Dean could almost forget the approaching holiday. The battle lines being drawn in his own home. Nicholas Lawrence, one of Dean's oldest friends, stopped by the office 3 days before Thanksgiving. They'd grown up in the same foster home for 2 years. Nick had been the older kid who'd shown Dean the ropes, taught him how to survive. Nick had gone on to become a pharmacist, building a successful career while maintaining the sharp instincts that had kept them both safe as kids. You look like hell, Nick observed, settling into a chair across from Dean's desk. Thanks. Violet's mother is coming for Thanksgiving. The Ice Queen? My condolences. Nick had met Iris once, at Miles's birthday party. The disdain had been mutual. How's my godson? Good. Great, actually. But Violet and her mother are pushing medication again. Nick's expression darkened. Dean, he's 6. Unless there's a serious behavioral issue, there isn't. He's just a kid with energy and imagination. But that's not good enough for the Pittmans. Everything has to be controlled, managed, perfected. You need to stand firm on this. Those medications can have serious side effects, especially for kids that young. Dean nodded. He knew Nick was right. He just wished his wife did too. Listen, Nick said, I'm working Thanksgiving covering the emergency shift at the pharmacy. But I'm coming by Friday with presents for Miles. Hang in there until then. After Nick left, Dean sat alone in his office, staring at the blueprints on his desk. He'd spent his career fixing broken structures, finding ways to preserve what was valuable while removing what was damaged. He wished family dynamics were as straightforward as engineering. His phone buzzed. A text from Violet. Mom wants to come early Thursday to help cook. She'll be here at 8 a.m. Dean closed his eyes. 24 hours. He just had to get through 24 hours. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and gray. Dean was up at dawn again, making pancakes with Miles in their quiet kitchen routine. The boys seemed to sense the tension in the house, staying closer to Dean than usual. "Will Grandma Iris be nice today?" Miles asked. Dean wanted to say yes, wanted to promise his son that today would be different. But he'd never lied to Miles, and he wasn't about to start. "Just stay close to me, okay? And if anything feels wrong, you tell me right away." The doorbell rang at exactly 8 o'clock. Iris swept in with her husband Claude Pittman trailing behind, laden with dishes and bags. Claude was a retiring man, worn down by 50 years of marriage to Iris. He gave Dean a brief nod, the most rebellion he ever showed. "The kitchen's this way, though I'm sure you remember," Dean said dryly. Iris ignored him, already taking over. Violet appeared, and mother and daughter fell into their familiar rhythm, shutting Dean out completely. "Come on, Claude," Dean said. "Let's watch football." They settled in the den, Miles between them, and for a while there was peace. Claude was actually decent company when separated from his wife. He'd been a history professor before retirement, and he and Miles had long conversations about ancient civilizations. But Iris's voice carried from the kitchen, sharp observations about Dean's inadequacy as a husband and father filtering through. Dean saw Miles flinch at each criticism. "Don't listen to her," Claude said quietly, surprising Dean. She's hard on everyone." It was the closest thing to an apology Dean had ever heard from the man. Dinner was set for 4 o'clock. The dining room table was immaculate. Iris had brought her own china, apparently finding Dean and Violet's unacceptable. Extended family began arriving. Violet's brother Ross Thomas and his wife Cheryl, their teenage daughters looking bored and checking their phones. Ross had always been decent to Dean, but he'd never stood up to his mother either. Nick Lawrence called just as they were sitting down. "Hey, sorry to bother you, but I'm at the pharmacy and realized I left Miles's birthday present at my apartment. Would it be weird if I stopped by after my shift? Around 6? "Not at all. We'd love to see you. Everything okay there?" Dean glanced toward the dining room where Iris was directing everyone to their seats, like a general commanding troops. "Ask me in 3 hours." He hung up and joined the family. Miles was seated between Violet and Iris. Dean had tried to protest this arrangement, but been overruled. He took his place at the head of the table, watching his son nervously clutch his fork. The meal began with Iris offering a prayer that somehow managed to be both pious and passive-aggressive, thanking God for families that stay together despite challenges while looking pointedly at Dean. For the first hour, things remained civil. Miles was quieter than usual, barely touching his food. Dean noticed Iris watching the boy with an expression he couldn't quite read, something calculating. "Miles, eat your turkey," Violet said. "Not hungry. You need to eat," Iris added, her voice saccharine. "Growing boys need their strength." Dean was about to intervene when Iris did something that happened so quickly he almost missed it. She reached into her purse and pulled out a pill bottle, shaking one into her hand. Then, while cutting Miles's turkey, she pressed the pill into a piece of meat. "Here, sweetheart," she said, putting the piece on Miles's plate. "This is the most tender part." Dean's entire body went cold. He watched as Miles picked up his fork, moving the turkey toward his mouth. "Miles, wait." Dean started to rise. But before the words were fully out, he was moving on instinct, knocking the fork from his son's hand. The piece of turkey flew across the table, landing on Cheryl's plate. Everyone froze. "What the hell, Dean?" Violet demanded. "What did you give him?" Dean's voice was deadly quiet, his eyes locked on Iris. "I don't know what you're talking about. I saw you. I saw you put something in his food." He turned to Miles. "Spit out anything you ate. Now." Miles, frightened, obeyed. Dean's heart was pounding. He'd seen it, he was sure he'd seen it, but doubt crept in at the edges. Had he? Or was he so on edge that he was imagining things? Then he looked at the piece of turkey on Cheryl's plate. Something white was visible in the meat. "What is that?" He pointed. Ross leaned forward, using his knife to separate the meat. A pill fell onto the plate. The entire table went silent. "It's just his ADHD medication," Iris said smoothly. "The doctor prescribed it. I was trying to help." "Miles isn't on any medication," Dean said. "I've never agreed to any medication." "Well, perhaps you should have," Iris snapped, her composure cracking. "That child is out of control, and you refuse to do anything about it." "I was simply poisoning my son?" Dean's voice was like ice. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a mild sedative." To help him through dinner. To help all of us have a peaceful meal for once. Dean picked up the pill with a napkin, his hands shaking with rage. Get out of my house. Dean, Violet started. No. Absolutely not. Your mother just drugged our son without permission. She's leaving. Now. She was trying to help. Violet's face was flushed. You're always so resistant to anything that might actually make our lives easier. By drugging him? You think that's acceptable? Ross stood up. Mom, maybe you should. Sit down, Ross. Iris's voice was sharp. She turned to Dean. You've been an inadequate father since the day that boy was born. Someone needed to take action. The doorbell rang. Dean held up a hand. Don't move. He went to the door, still holding the pill in the napkin. Nick Lawrence stood on the porch, holding a wrapped present, his smile fading as he saw Dean's expression. What happened? Nick, I need you to look at something. Dean handed him the napkin. My mother-in-law put this in Miles's food. She says it's ADHD medication. Nick's professional demeanor snapped into place. He carefully examined the pill, and Dean watched his friend's face go pale. Dean, this isn't ADHD medication. What is it? Nick looked up, and Dean saw real fear in his eyes. It's pentobarbital, veterinary grade. This is a euthanasia drug, Dean. For horses. The world seemed to tilt. What? This could kill him. A dose this size for a 6-year-old? Nick pulled out his phone. I'm calling 911. Now. Dean turned back to the dining room. Iris had gone white, her carefully controlled mask finally cracking. Violet looked between her mother and Dean, confusion and dawning horror on her face. You tried to kill my son, Dean said softly. No, it must be the wrong bottle. I didn't. Iris stumbled over her words. You brought horse euthanasia to Thanksgiving dinner. Dean continued, his voice getting louder with each word. You hid it in his food. If I hadn't been watching you, if I hadn't knocked that fork away, it was supposed to just calm him down, Iris whispered. That's what they said it would do. Just make him sleep through dinner. They? Who the hell is they? But Iris had collapsed into a chair, the weight of what she'd done, what she'd almost done finally crushing her. Claude Pittman stood, his face gray. Iris, what have you done? Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The next 3 hours were chaos. Police arrived first, then paramedics who checked Miles over thoroughly. Dean wouldn't let go of his son, holding him close while officers questioned everyone at the table. Iris sat in frozen silence, her lawyer already called. Nick provided his professional analysis, explaining exactly what pentobarbital would have done to a child Miles's size. The detective's expression grew darker with each detail. He would have fallen asleep at the table, Nick explained. Seemed like he was tired. By the time you realized something was wrong, his respiratory system would have started shutting down. It would look like a sudden illness, maybe an allergic reaction. By the time you got him to a hospital, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Dean felt sick. He looked at Miles, who was pressed against his side, and imagined his bright, energetic son going still and quiet, imagined rushing him to an ER, imagined. He couldn't let himself imagine the rest. Violet stood apart from everyone, her face blank with shock. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Mom, what did you do? But Iris just shook her head, her lawyer's hand on her arm, silent. The detective, a woman named Daisy Craig, took Dean aside. We're taking her in for questioning. Attempted murder, child endangerment. We'll need your full statement. And your son will need to be examined by a pediatric specialist just to be safe. Is she going to prison? Detective Craig's expression was hard. If I have anything to say about it, yes. But I need you to understand cases like this can be complicated. She'll claim it was an accident, that she didn't know what the pill was, that someone must have mixed up her medications. She said they told her it would make him sleep. Dean said. Someone gave her that pill knowing what it was. This was planned. Then we need to find out who they are. Dean watched through the window as Iris was led to a police car, her perfect posture finally broken. Claude followed, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. Ross approached Dean hesitantly. I didn't know. I swear to God, Dean, I had no idea she would ever. I know. Dean's voice was hollow. But your mother just tried to murder my son. So, forgive me if I need some space from your family right now. Ross nodded and gathered his wife and daughters, leaving quickly. Finally, it was just Dean, Violet, Miles, and Nick. I should take Miles to my place for the night, Nick offered. Let you two talk. No. Dean's grip on his son tightened. Miles stays with me. Violet flinched. Dean, I didn't know. You have to believe me. Do I? Because you've been pushing medication on him for months. You and your mother, whispering about it, making appointments with doctors behind my back. Not this, never this. I thought she said it was just something to help him focus. And you didn't think to discuss it with me? His father? Violet's face crumpled. She's my mother. I trusted her. I never thought, well, now you know. Your mother is a monster. The word hung in the air between them. Violet looked at Miles, then back at Dean, and something broke in her expression. I need to see her. At the station. I need to understand. No. Dean stood, Miles in his arms. You need to decide, Violet. Right now, your mother tried to kill our son. So you can stand with her, or you can stand with us. But you don't get both. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Get out. Dean. Get out. Violet grabbed her purse and keys, tears streaming down her face, and left. Nick put a hand on Dean's shoulder. Come on. Let's get Miles settled. Then we need to talk about what happens next. Miles fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from the trauma. Dean sat watching him breathe, unable to look away. Every rise and fall of his small chest felt like a miracle. Nick came back from the kitchen with coffee. Decaf. You need to sleep at some point. I can't. Dean's voice cracked. Every time I close my eyes, I see him eating that turkey. I see what would have happened if I'd been 1 second slower. But you weren't. You saved him, Dean. Why did she do it, Nick? What kind of person tries to kill a 6-year-old child? Nick was quiet for a long moment. I've been thinking about that. About what she said, that they told her it would just make him sleep. Someone gave her that pill, Dean. Someone convinced her it was safe. Dean looked up. You think there's someone else involved? Pentobarbital isn't something you just find lying around. It's heavily controlled. You need veterinary access to get it. And the dose. It was precisely measured for his size. This wasn't a mistake. The implications settled over Dean like a weight. She was going to kill him and make it look like an accident. Maybe. Or maybe she really did think it was just a sedative. But either way, someone helped her, and we need to find out who. Dean's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Detective Craig. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning? We need to discuss something we found in Iris Pittman's purse. He showed Nick, who read it and frowned. What do you think they found? Only one way to find out. Dean didn't sleep that night. He lay on the couch next to Miles, watching his son sleep, his mind churning through the events of the day. At some point near dawn, his phone rang. Violet? He almost didn't answer, but he needed to know what she'd chosen. Dean. Her voice was thick with tears. I talked to Mom. She says it was a mistake. That she thought the pill was from her doctor. That it was supposed to be a mild sedative. Nick identified it, Violet. It was horse euthanasia. She didn't know that. Someone must have given her the wrong medication. She would never. She admitted it at the table. She said, they told her it would make him sleep through dinner. That wasn't a mistake, that was premeditated. Silence on the other end. Violet, I need you to hear me. Your mother tried to kill Miles. And you have to decide if you believe that, if you're going to protect our son, or if you're going to keep defending her. She's my mother. Those 3 words told Dean everything he needed to know. Then I guess you've made your choice. He hung up. Nick appeared in the doorway. That sounded rough. She's choosing Iris. Dean felt numb. After everything, she's still choosing her mother. I'm sorry, man. Dean looked down at Miles. Still sleeping peacefully, unaware that his family was fracturing around him. I need to protect him. From all of them. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I need to find out who gave Iris that pill. I need to understand how deep this goes. Because if Violet's involved, he couldn't finish the thought. One step at a time, Nick said. First, we talk to Detective Craig. Then we figure out next moves. But Dean was already thinking ahead. His engineer's mind working through the problem like a structural analysis. Someone had planned this. Someone had given Iris the tools to murder his son, and he was going to find out who, no matter what it took. The police station was fluorescent and cold. Detective Craig met Dean in a conference room, spreading photographs across the table. "We found these in Mrs. Pittman's purse," she said. Along with the pill bottle, Dean looked at the photos. They showed Miles at school, at the park, getting into Dean's car. Surveillance photos, taken from a distance. Someone's been watching him, Dean said, his blood running cold. Not just watching. Planning. Detective Craig slid another photo forward. This was on her phone. A text thread, but the number's a burner. Untraceable. The texts were chilling. "The boy needs to be handled. He's disrupting everything. I can't just... I'm not asking. Use what I gave you. Thanksgiving. Big meal. Lots of confusion. He'll just seem tired. What if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong. Just slip it in his food. He'll fall asleep. Peaceful. By the time they figure it out, it'll be too late to prove anything. Accidental overdose. Tragic." Dean felt sick. She knew. She knew exactly what she was doing. The question is, who was she texting? The phone records show this conversation going back 3 months. Someone's been grooming her, pushing her toward this. "Can you trace the number?" "We're trying, but these burner phones are tough. We need another angle." Detective Craig leaned forward. "Mr. Patton, I need you to think. Who would want your son dead?" Dean's mind raced. Violet's family hated that she married me. I'm not from their world, foster care kid, working class background. And Miles, he's everything they despise. Too loud, too energetic, too common. Would they kill him over it? Dean thought about the coldness in Iris's eyes, the way she looked at Miles like he was a problem to be solved. "I don't know. Maybe. But this level of planning? This feels like more than just social prejudice." Detective Craig was quiet for a moment. "What do you know about the Pittman family finances?" "Why?" "Because I've been doing some background. The Pittmans are old money, but that money's been drying up. Claude Pittman made some bad investments in the 2008 crash. They've been living off their daughter's money for years. Violet has a trust fund," Dean said slowly, "from her grandmother, but it has provisions if something happens to her or Miles, it reverts to the Pittman estate." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. "If Miles died," Detective Craig said softly, "and Violet was too grief-stricken to manage her affairs, Iris would control everything." Dean felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. This was about money. They were going to kill my son for a fucking inheritance. "We need proof. Right now." Iris isn't talking, and these texts aren't enough to prove conspiracy. "We need to find out who she was working with." Dean stood, pacing. "Give me 24 hours. I have an idea. Mr. Patton, you need to let us handle this. With respect, detective, you're dealing with protocols and warrants. I'm dealing with my son's life. Just give me 24 hours. If I find anything, I'll bring it straight to you." Detective Craig studied him. "Don't do anything illegal. I'll do what I have to do." Dean drove straight to his office. Jorge was there. Weekend work being their norm during busy season. "You look terrible," Jorge said. "What happened?" Dean told him everything. Jorge's face went from shock to rage to cold determination. "What do you need?" "Access to the Pittman family records. Financial, medical, communications. Everything. That's not exactly legal, Dean. I know. But if I don't find out who else is involved, if I just let the police handle this slowly, Miles isn't safe. Whoever sent those texts is still out there." Jorge was quiet for a moment. "I have a friend, does computer security consulting. Some of it's above board. Some of it isn't. Can you call them?" 20 minutes later, they were on a secure video call with a woman who introduced herself only as Carrie. She listened to Dean's story without interruption. "You want me to crack into a wealthy family's private records and find evidence of a murder conspiracy," she said flatly. "Yes. This could land me in prison. Name your price." Carrie smiled. "I don't want money, Mr. Patton. I want justice. I had a cousin who died from accidental overdose when her family decided she was an embarrassment. So yeah, I'll help you burn these people down." Over the next 12 hours, Carrie worked magic. She cracked email accounts, phone records, financial transactions. Dean watched as the conspiracy unfolded across her screens. The text to Iris had come from multiple numbers, all burners, but Carrie traced them back through cell tower pings to a single location, Dr. Sheila Bender's veterinary clinic. Sheila Bender, Dean read from the screen. High-end vet clinic, caters to the wealthy. And look at this, Iris has been a client for 15 years. Her dogs, her horses, more than that, Carrie said, pulling up financial records. Dr. Bender is Claude Pittman's younger sister. She changed her name after a scandal at her previous practice. She was accused of euthanizing animals without owner consent. But it was hushed up. The picture was getting clearer. Family conspiracy, Dean said. They all knew. It gets worse. Carrie pulled up another file. Look at Violet's recent activity. She withdrew $50,000 from her trust fund 3 months ago. The money went to a shell company registered to Dr. Sheila Bender. Dean felt like he'd been punched. Violet knew. She helped fund this. I'm sorry, man, Jorge said quietly. But Dean was already past grief, into cold rage. His wife, the woman he'd loved, the mother of his child, had paid to have their son killed. I need copies of everything, he told Carrie. Already done, encrypted and backed up to 3 separate locations. But Dean, you need to be smart about how you use this. These people have money and lawyers. If you come at them wrong, they'll bury you. Dean understood. This wasn't about brute force, it was about precision. He'd spent his career learning how to find the weak points in structures. The exact places to apply pressure to bring the whole thing down. It was time to apply those skills to the Pittman family. The plan came together over the next 2 days. Dean moved Miles to Nick's house for safety, then reached out to Ross Thomas. Violet's brother met him at a coffee shop, looking haggard. Your mother's out on bail, Dean said without preamble. I know. Dad posted it. Dean, I swear I didn't know. I believe you. But I need your help. Ross blinked. With what? Do you know your Aunt Shelia, your dad's sister? The vet? Yeah. Barely. She and Mom are close though. Why? Dean slid a folder across the table. Because she supplied the pill that almost killed Miles. She and your mother planned this together. And Violet paid for it. Ross opened the folder, his face going pale as he read. This can't be real. It's real. Financial records, text messages, everything. Your family conspired to murder my 6-year-old son so they could control Violet's inheritance. Violet wouldn't, she loves Miles. Then why did she withdraw $50,000 and give it to Shelia 3 months ago? Right when the planning started? Ross sat back, looking sick. What do you need from me? I need you to get your mother and Shelia together. Tell them you're worried about the investigation, that you want to help them get their story straight. Record everything they say. That's entrapment. No, it's a concerned son trying to understand what happened. You wear a wire, you ask questions, and you let them incriminate themselves. Then we take it to Detective Craig. Ross was quiet for a long time. They tried to kill my nephew. Yes. And my sister helped them. Yes. Ross's jaw tightened. Okay, I'll do it. But I want immunity. I don't go down with them. Detective Craig is willing to work with you if you cooperate. They shook hands, and Dean felt the first piece of his revenge snap into place. Ross wore the wire 2 days later. Detective Craig monitored from a van outside Iris's house, Dean beside her, listening through headphones. Mom, Aunt Shelia, we need to talk. Ross's voice came through clearly. Ross, this isn't a good time, Iris said. She sounded strained, the perfect composure finally cracking. Make time. The police are asking questions about where the pill came from. They're talking about bringing Aunt Shelia in for questioning. A pause. Then Shelia's voice. They can't prove anything. They found the bottle in Mom's purse, with your clinic's label on it. That doesn't mean. Shelia, stop. Iris's voice was sharp. Ross, what did you tell them? Nothing. But I need to know the truth. Did you really try to kill Miles? Silence. Then, it was supposed to be painless. He would have just gone to sleep. Dean's hands clenched into fists. Jesus Christ, Mom. Why? Because that child was ruining everything. Iris's voice rose. Violet could have had a proper life, a proper family, but instead she married that nobody and produced a defective child who embarrasses us at every turn. The trust fund was supposed to keep our family secure, but instead, it's being wasted on a boy who will never amount to anything. So, you decided to kill him. I decided to solve a problem. Shelia provided the means. Violet provided the funding. It was supposed to look like an accident, a tragic case of undiagnosed health issues. We would have supported her through her grief, helped her manage her affairs, and eventually things would have returned to how they should be. And Dean? Iris laughed bitterly. He would have been devastated. Maybe divorced Violet, taken himself out of the picture. It would have worked perfectly if he hadn't been watching me so closely. You're talking about murdering a 6-year-old child. I'm talking about cutting out a cancer before it spread further. Iris's voice was cold. That boy has your sister so twisted around. She can barely think straight. The medication approach would have been cleaner, but Dean refused to cooperate. So we found another solution. Violet knew. It wasn't a question. Of course she knew. Oh, she had doubts, maternal instinct, and all that. But she understood the necessity. The money would secure all our futures, and she could always have another child, a better child with someone appropriate. Ross's voice was shaking. You're monsters. All of you. We're practical, Ross. Something you've never been. I've heard enough, Detective Craig said, pulling off her headphones. She spoke into her radio. Move in. Arrest them both. Dean watched through the window as police swarmed the house. Iris and Shelia were let out in handcuffs, both of them screaming about lawyers and rights. Ross emerged, looking shell-shocked. I need you to bring Violet in, Dean said to Detective Craig. She was part of this. We'll pick her up within the hour. Dean pulled out his phone and called Nick. How's Miles? Good. Playing video games. Asking about you. I'm coming to get him. It's almost over. The trial took 6 months. In that time, Dean filed for divorce, got a restraining order, and built an airtight case for sole custody. Violet tried to fight it, tried to claim she'd been manipulated, that she hadn't really understood what was happening. But the financial records didn't lie. The texts didn't lie. And when Ross testified about the wire recording, her last shred of defense crumbled. Iris Pittman got 25 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. Shelia Bender got 20. Violet avoided prison with a plea deal. She testified against her mother and aunt in exchange for probation, but Dean made sure she would never be alone with Miles again. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. Dean walked out of the courthouse with full custody and sole decision-making authority. Miles was waiting with Nick, playing on a tablet in the hallway. Is it done? Nick asked. It's done. Miles looked up. Are we going home, Daddy? Dean knelt down, pulling his son into a hug. Yeah, buddy, we're going home. They moved to a different house, no memories of Thanksgiving dinners and hidden pills, no ghost of Violet's betrayal. Dean threw himself into being the father Miles deserved, into building a life that was theirs alone. Jorge became a fixture in their lives, a chosen uncle who showed up for soccer games and science fairs. Nick was there too, the godfather who understood what it meant to choose family rather than just accept the one you were given. Miles thrived. Without the constant pressure to be someone he wasn't, without the judgment and criticism, he bloomed. His energy became confidence. His curiosity became creativity. Dean enrolled him in a school that celebrated different learning styles, and Miles flourished. 2 years after the trial, on a Saturday morning much like the one that had started everything, Dean stood in his kitchen, making pancakes while Miles chattered about his upcoming art show at school. Will Uncle Jorge come? Miles asked. He said he wouldn't miss it. What about Mom? The question was inevitable, though it still hurt. I don't know, buddy. Maybe. If the judge says it's okay. Miles was quiet for a moment. I don't really want her there. Dean sat down next to his son. That's okay. You're allowed to feel that. She tried to hurt me. She did. And that's something I'll never forgive. But you know what? We don't need her. We've built something good here. You and me and our family. The family we chose. Miles nodded, then smiled. Can we make chocolate chip pancakes? Absolutely. As they cooked together, Dean reflected on how close he'd come to losing everything. 1 second slower, one moment of inattention, and Miles would be gone. But he trusted his instincts, he'd protected his son, and he'd made sure the people who tried to hurt them faced justice. The scars would always be there, the knowledge that Violet had betrayed them, that her family had been willing to murder a child for money. But scars were proof of survival, evidence that you'd faced something terrible and lived. Dean had rebuilt his life once before, aging out of foster care with nothing but determination. He'd do it again, this time with his son beside him. They'd build something better, stronger, founded on love instead of obligation. Miles laughed as chocolate chips scattered across the counter, and Dean thought about the future. College funds to set up, adventures to plan, a life to build away from the Pittmans and their toxic legacy. "Hey, Dad," Miles said, looking up with syrup on his chin. "Yeah? I'm glad it's just us." Dean ruffled his hair. "Me too, buddy. Me too." The months that followed were healing. Dean established routines with Miles' weekend hikes, Tuesday game nights, cooking experiments that sometimes went hilariously wrong. He watched his son grow more confident, more secure. Violet tried to re-establish contact a few times. Letters that spoke of rehabilitation and therapy, of understanding now what she'd been part of. Dean read them once and filed them away. Maybe someday Miles would want to know her again, but that would be his choice, not Dean's. Claude Pittman reached out once, a brief phone call where he apologized for his wife, his sister, the entire toxic family system he'd been too weak to escape. Dean appreciated it but kept his distance. The old man would have to live with his failures. Ross, surprisingly, became an ally. He divorced himself from his mother's influence, started therapy, and made genuine efforts to be a good uncle to Miles when supervised visits were allowed. Dean appreciated it, even if trust came slowly. The civil suit came next. Dean went after Violet's trust fund, the Pittman estate, everything. They tried to fight, but the evidence was overwhelming. The settlement secured Miles' future college, security, opportunities Dean had never had. On the 2-year anniversary of that Thanksgiving, Dean took Miles to the cemetery where Dean's foster mother was buried, the one adult from his childhood who'd shown him what real love looked like. "She would have loved you," Dean told Miles as they placed flowers on the grave. "She taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who protects you, who loves you even when it's hard. Like you and me? Like you and me." They stood there in comfortable silence, and Dean felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The Pittmans were behind bars. Miles was safe, and they had a future built on truth rather than obligation. "Can we get ice cream on the way home?" Miles asked. Dean laughed. "Yeah, buddy, we can get ice cream." As they walked back to the car, Miles's hand in his, Dean thought about justice. Not the legal kind, though that mattered, but the deeper kind, the justice of a child being safe, of a father protecting his son, of building a life where love mattered more than money or status. He'd won, not just the legal battles, but the war for his son's life and future. And every day he got to wake up and be Miles's father was a victory worth celebrating. The Pittmans had tried to destroy them. Instead, they destroyed themselves, while Dean and Miles had emerged stronger, closer, unbreakable. That was the best revenge of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.